It is Thanksgiving week, as some would like to call it American Thanksgiving week. And Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's podcast, the Players podcast, the Pilgrims podcast is here.
Oh, God.
And I'm Russ at Joy on Broad, joined as always by the illustrious, the fantastic, and perhaps the one that I'm most thankful for in the hockey world. And of course, that is Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. Anthony, my dear friend, I am so thankful for our audience, which is continuing to grow. Believe me, growing massively, hugely, huge. Things that are not growing. Faith in the Flyers over these last few games. And we are recording this coming right off the heels of the Flyers' 5-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres, which was a lot of things. And we're going to break that down as well as some of the games since the last time that we recorded. So, Anthony, why don't you take it away?
Well, for 40 minutes, the Flyers were a pretty darn good hockey team against the Buffalo Sabres. It's a shame they were behind 4-0 at the time that 40 minutes began. Because the first period, Russ, against Buffalo may have been the worst period any team in the NHL has played this season. It was that poor. And it's all around. Look, Alex Lyon got the starting goal tonight. You know we like Alex Lyon from our interview with him this summer.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. He was terrible. He got yanked after the first period, faced 12 shots, made 8 saves, but gave up, I believe, 2 of the 4 goals were juicy rebounds. One was not as bad a rebound, but the puck still lived in front of the net. And then he got beat on a bad angle shot that he definitely should have saved. But the play in front of him was as bad as I've ever seen. I mean, the Flyers have had bad play in front of the goalie all this season, for much of the playoffs last year, last season before. I mean, since Hackstall's been the coach, we've seen a lot of bad play in front of the goaltender. But what took place against the Buffalo Sabres was an abject embarrassment. There was so much. I don't even know where to begin. They turned the puck over everywhere. Neutral zone, own zone, offensive end. Wherever they were turning the puck over. And then they were caught so out of position. There were times when you had 3 guys in the same spot and another guy gets open. I mean, Jeff Skinner is the leading goal scorer in the NHL. He gets into the high slot, unmarked, for the first goal of the game. No one goes near him. He's the leading goal scorer in the NHL, unmarked. Puck comes right to him, easy goal. It's really unacceptable. And they're saying that. I mean, yeah, Giroux says it. It's unacceptable. We have big 2 games coming up here. Yeah, you do. But guess what? You're 9-10-2 now. You've lost 12 of 21. You're closer to the bottom of the standings than you are the top of the standings. This happens year over year over year. Go back and look at Hackstall's tenure as coach and look at where they are after 21 games. It's the same story. It's lather, rinse, repeat, man. It's the same thing over and over again. Hey, but I will tell you this. Here's one thing that happened in the first period that hasn't happened all year long. There was a fight, Russ.
Yay.
Scott Lawton got into a fight. First fight of the season. That was with 7 seconds left after they were behind 4-0. So, yeah.
When you can't win with the sticks, you win without the gloves.
But it is this. And I will say, so the fight happens. They go into intermission, and they come out in the second period, and they're really good in the second period for both goals in the second period. And then third period, they controlled the play most of the third period, just couldn't cash one in, and then the Sabres got an empty net goal to make it 5-2. But, in the second period, the one thing that I really liked about the way they were playing is they were playing a more physical style. That's not to say, it's fighting. They were not letting Buffalo come out of the zone easy or come into the zone easy. There was a lot of physical contact. There was a lot of physical play along the wall. It was really, really good stuff to see them try and take over a game playing that way and then really kind of getting puck possession that way. I really think that that's a way that works for this team. They just don't do it. I don't know why they don't do it. And I'm not sitting here telling you, Russ, that they need to go out there and start banging heads all over the place. But they need to, in order to play with their tempo, they need to play with a more physical style. They cannot be so passive with the puck or passive around the puck. And that's part of the problem.
It just doesn't seem like they have the personnel.
Well, they don't have the defensive personnel. I mean, and they don't have a goalie. I mean, they've started 4 goalies for the first time in a season. It's only 21 games into the season, but they've started 4 goalies in a season for the first time since I think 1990-91 might be the last time it was. I think that's what they said on the broadcast. I do remember there was one season where they had more than that dressed, but they didn't start for more than 4 guys in a season since 90-91. And of the 4, Elliott's passable, and the rest are not. And so, therefore, this is what you have. This is what this team is. Goaltending. I don't care what your system is. What the structure is that you're trying to play. I don't care what analytics will tell you. In the end, in hockey, if you don't have a good goalie, you're not going to win. That's just plain and simple, right? I mean, I think that's everything else, you can have everything else trending in the right way. If your goalie's subpar, you're not going to win. So it starts there. The team defense, and it's not just the group of players on defense that are defensemen, but team defense is dreadful. Then they turn the puck over too much. Oh, guess what? They gave up another goal on the penalty kill tonight. Another one, right? Yeah, that wonderful PK continues to struggle. Didn't score on the power play. I mean, it's the same story every game. Win or lose, it's the same story every game. Because they win games playing like this, too, which is fascinating to me. They can be so inconsistent and still win a good number of games. So it's not necessarily about there not being, I don't necessarily think it's just a talent thing, so to speak, but it's certainly it's certainly a situation where the talent that they have doesn't come through the way it needs to. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm looking at it now, and listening to the post-game remarks and the post-game questions that were asked in the scrum around Hackstall. One of them was, it was either with Hackstall or it was Giroux, and that doesn't really matter at this point. The question was brought up, isn't it disappointing that, you couldn't carry the momentum from your last game, from the overtime game against Tampa Bay? And it's like, well, can we, let's be honest for a second. The Flyers had that one moment. They scored four goals in, what was it, 6.5 minutes, which never happens. I mean, the occurrences of that in hockey over the last 5 years, I would be fascinated to pull the stats. We didn't do it for this show. Maybe we'll do it for the next one. But it's so rare to score that many goals in that short of time. And is there something to be said for the fact that the team in the third period against Tampa Bay looked like a totally different team? They looked like a team that wasn't overthinking. They just looked like a group of guys who went out and decided that they were going to just kind of put it all on the line and get out of their own heads. Yeah, I mean, that was great. Did it look like after they scored their third goal in that game, they looked like a bunch of guys who believed they had momentum and were going to go on and win that game? Yeah, of course they did. They end up losing it in overtime, and it's a bummer. You feel like you're about to have this shift of momentum. Coming into that game, you had lost 2 consecutive at home to Florida and Jersey, and it felt like, hey, you know what, maybe we're going to be able to get this thing set right, go on the road against a Sabres team that's ahead of them in the standings, and then go into the holiday with knowing that you were going to host the Rangers. You had a game against Maple Leafs, Senators, all that. You had these games ahead of you, and the Penguins obviously to start December. You wanted to get some momentum behind you, fine, but you still didn't win that game. And I know that you can take positives out of a loss, but you still lost the game. And you lost that game primarily because you fell behind. You fell behind by 4 goals. And so, I try not to get annoyed by the questions that some people ask in these scrums, but it's that to me isn't something that I think should be asked. Because ultimately, it's still a loss. Is there a carryover effect? I don't know, maybe. But you're also, 4 days later? Is there really going to be that much momentum carrying through? And so it doesn't even matter all that much. Maybe if anything, it's just Isn't it embarrassing that you go out on the road here and you know that you need a good start, and when you were winning games, you were scoring the first goal of the game. Like, doesn't this say something about this team, this locker room, this coach, this coaching staff? We have the same conversations. I mean, you can pretty much put on any episode that we've done this season, and it's the same thing. Hell, you can even go back to stuff that we did last season. It's a lot of the same things. The PK is a disaster. They don't score on the power play. They come out flat in games. I listened to Hackstall in this post game press conference say, "Well, we had a good start in the last 3 games. Did you? Like, did you really?" Because what I continue to see is a team that looks like they've reverted back to what they were to start the season, and look is nothing like the team that went 5-0-1.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so when you think about it, they have now basically erased the goodwill that they had on that road trip.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they've erased
which is what we said we hoped wouldn't happen.
Right. So they're right back, basically, having gone 0-3-1 in the last 4. They're right back where they were heading onto that road trip. And so when Giroux says the next 2 games are big games, you think he senses something? Why is it the next 2 and not the next 3 or the next 5 or the next whatever? Why is it the next 2 games are big games?
Dunno, man.
Right?
There's only a few things that can really change.
So, I mean, when you look at the calendar, you play the Rangers Friday at home, and then they go to Toronto on Saturday, which is a really bad matchup for them. Then they get 2 days off. They have Ottawa at home, and then they get 3 days off before they go to Pittsburgh. You have 1 game in a week. Do these next 2 games dictate, and we've had this conversation before too, Russ, but do these next 2 games, and we talked about this when they headed into that road trip, are these next 2 games as important as that road trip was for the coach or for a player, a part of the core that make a significant trade of some kind coming up right after Thanksgiving? I mean, that's the big question. And when you hear, you never really hear guys talk about a collection of games. It's always the next game is the big, an important game, blah, blah, blah. Or, this next month is important or this next week is important, whatever. You never really hear them say, we have 2 big games coming up. Why is it 2? Like, that to me tells me that they think something's coming.
I don't know.
Maybe I'm reading into it, but that's
I kind of think it might be. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm looking at it. It's a division game on Black Friday. That's a big game. It's always a big game, and the Maple Leafs, like, that's going to be a big game. So, like, maybe it is something slipping there, in him either sensing it or him knowing it or somebody having confided something in him that the next 2 really do mean something. But I don't know. Part of me thinks that this is reading into it, and then part of me is like, yeah, it's not totally unfathomable that somebody confided into him that, like, something doesn't happen, like something has to give. But then, this is why I said, coming off or going into the West Coast trip and then coming out of it, I said, you can't overreact one way or another to how this goes, because they were playing so poorly going into that trip that it's like, okay, well, if you come out with some decent results, then, like, does that buy everybody time? Like, maybe, but if you're at a spot where the West Coast trip was going to dictate whether or not you made a big trade, you traded a Jake Voracek or a Wayne Simmons or both, or you considered firing your coach, or Comcast Spectacor got so fed up that they decided to just outright clean house. If they were that close, potentially, before the West Coast swing, why should a couple good results negate all of that? And I think that was the part that I struggled the most with. And obviously, I'm happy, as a lifelong fan of the team, and I would much rather go into a happy locker room after these games than a down one. But you go out and you have a great stretch. Like 5-0-1 isn't easy to do, especially going on a West Coast swing like that and playing against some of the teams they played against. Like, it's not easy to do in this league. It's not something that everybody, manages to do with consistency, with regularity. It felt like they might have been turning a corner. And now you see them just kind of go back and revert to this. And you just kind of have to question. Look, I know a lot of fans question this group of leaders in the locker room. They question the captain. They question Voracek. They question pretty much any vet on this team. And I don't know. I honestly can't say. We're not in there when they have a players only meeting. We're not in there in the immediate aftermath when we hear these guys bantering back and forth. We don't know how well, and this is a thing that I've questioned. I think, I've said to you, I don't think I've said on the show before, but I do kind of wonder if you're a younger player and you're looking around this locker room, and let's say the coach isn't motivating, or you're being held accountable as a young player, and then you see that the two special teams coaches on this team, in charge of the penalty kill and of the power play, aren't getting results, and nothing is changing with them, or at least to us as media or as fans, we're not seeing any changes. Perhaps there's been a changing of who's responsible or how much responsibility lies with both Knobloch and LePerriere. I think as a player, you kind of have to say, all right, well, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of accountability there. Nothing's really changed. Do I now start to tune out Giroux? Do I now start to tune out this vet group? Do I tune out this coaching staff? And do I just do what's best for me? And I'm kind of thinking that that's what it is. Because I even go back to weeks ago when Scott Lawton said, we're cheating. We're all cheating. Everybody's trying to cut corners to get themselves set up in a lane to go on a counterattack, to get their breakaway, almost like, implying that everybody just wants to have their moment. I think it's a selfish team. I really do. There are certain players and certain plays when I think these guys are selfless. I asked Haxtell that in a post-game press conference about when Nolan Patrick passed up the opportunity to force it to Voracek for or to Couturier for the hat trick. Like, those things were selfless. But I look at other guys on the team and I'm thinking, like, do I really think they're buying in? No. I think if they did, they would be playing harder for each other. We wouldn't see this kind of apathy to start games. I don't know. I know I'm saying a lot. I know it's a lot of points. I know.
Your points are very.
It's really frustrating.
Your points are valid, and here's the thing. I mean, optimists will sit there and say, "Well, they're only 9-10-2. It's not that awful of a record. They're only 5 points out of a playoff spot, which is not a lot." But I will tell you this. They're only ahead of one team in the Eastern Conference. They're ahead of Florida by 1 point. Florida has 2 games in hand. Okay. There are 22 of the 31 teams in hockey have played at least 21 games. There's still some that are behind, trailing that. They've played 19 or 20. Actually, I think there's one team that's played even less than that, if I'm not mistaken. No, 19, 20, or 19 is the lowest. Okay. So, but there's 22 teams who've played 21 games. The Flyers have the worst record of those 22 teams. So that means even though they're ahead of other teams Vegas is the only one that's behind. I lied. Vegas has 20 points. They have the same number of points. Vegas has 19 points. Flyers have 20. So Vegas is behind. But they're 21st out of 22. Okay? That's bad. We're talking about a team who is at the bottom of the league. It's not good. Special teams are a disaster. Goaltending is a disaster. Team defense is a disaster. They have the 6th worst goal differential in the NHL. They're minus 11 through 21 games. It's just bad right now. It's a bad team, and something has to give. I don't know what Ron Hextall's waiting for, and if he's really hardcore about keeping the coach, okay. I'm not a fan of that idea, but okay, then you got to do something with the roster. But to just sit there and let the same thing happen every night is mind-numbing. I've never seen this before. Let's just put it that way. Like, at least when the Sixers were tanking, you knew there was purpose behind it, right? I didn't agree with it, but you knew they were losing on purpose or trying to lose. Not necessarily losing on purpose, but trying to lose so that they could put them themselves in a better position to get a better draft pick. Flyers aren't doing that. The Flyers aren't trying to be bad, and yet they are. So at that point, something's got to change. Something's got to give. And yet here they sit like Nero, fiddling while everything burns around.
That was good. I like that. That was well done.
Thank you.
I don't even know where to pick up from there.
I don't.
Wow.
That's the thing, Russ. Like we can. I think we're going to wrap this up early tonight. Like usually we have like this long diatribe. We have an hour-long show. We do all kinds of fun stuff and everything else. We're 21 minutes into the show, 22 minutes into the show, and we got nothing else to talk about because it's the same thing. It's the same thing, and that's what when will they understand that? I mean, you keep talking about there being empty seats, and there are empty seats, and I know we argue about what the actual number of people are that are in the building, and I think that you're a little facetious with your number, but at the same time, you're not right. I know you're not right.
I'm certainly right.
No, okay, but you're not wrong. Is that the number is dwindling? It's getting worse and worse and worse. And, go on StubHub and look if you want to buy tickets to a Flyers home game. On day of the game, you can get lower level seats for $30, $35. These are tickets that normally go for $120, $125, $130, $150, whatever. You're getting them for pennies on the dollar. And why is that? Because the fans have recognized that this is bad. And the organization continues to sit there and twiddle their thumbs and not do anything about it. And that's what the most maddening thing is. Either you start winning or just blow it up and be really bad, but at least you're starting over. But to sit there and continue to be smack dab in the middle mediocre and not really improve over the course of the last 5 years, what are you doing? What's the purpose of that? That doesn't register with anyone. I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer, and nor do I think the Flyers have an answer, which is why we keep hearing things like, well, they're still looking for their identity. BS, man. They're not looking for anything. They can't find an identity because this is them. This is what they are. Their identity is as a boring, mediocre hockey team. That's all they are. They will not be anything more until something changes.
So let's go with that. Obviously, we're expecting, some kind of move has to happen, or maybe not. We're expecting it. We're essentially demanding it, right? Like as a collective between. I don't know how much of the media cares, but I think we care, and I think that the fans care. So let's look at it. Hextall's job is safe, one would assume, unless he's unwilling to fire the coach, and Comcast Spectacor says you have to. So it really is going to come down to, do you make a trade, which is going to rattle, the locker room, which I would say, there was enough evidence here, and Hextall's comments a few games ago, and we talked about this on the last show, but the fact that he had mentioned that, they can't pay attention to what's going on the other side of the glass, clearly referencing the fans in Wells Fargo Center and the way that they react to this team. If you see a trade of Wayne Simmons or Jake Voracek, I think you're going to shake this group to the core. I don't know if they're tough enough mentally to deal with that. If you fire the coach, what are we expecting? If it's just going to be an internal hire, is that internal hire going to make some changes to the PK and to the power play units? They're going to keep those assistants in place. If you go out of the organization to hire a coach, Joel Quenneville's still out there. There have been other positions filled. Ken Hitchcock got hired. Is Quenneville just waiting for this job? What was it? The St. Louis job was out there for the taking. Are we thinking that if a Quenneville gets hired, does he have a group of guys ready to go to come in here and just totally replace everybody on the staff? Could such a changeover in coaching benefit this team, or is it going to just throw the thing deeper into chaos? I don't know. I get the idea that a change has to be made, or a change should be made, and it's not just for the sake of change. It's because the team is mediocre at best, but I don't know how this team would react to any of it. And even if I were to suspend the reality or suspend my perception of what I think this team is and the group that they are, in a collective mentality, to think that, oh yeah, you know what, this will give them the kick in the ass they need. Like, I don't know if it's there. I really don't. I genuinely don't know if it's going to make a difference. I mean, what happens? You trade Wayne Simmons. Are you really going to get much value? Probably not. You're going to get back an impact guy. Like you were saying, they need to play a more physical brand of hockey. Well, he's one of your most physical players. So if he's gone, who's going to step up in his stead? Are you going to trade him for a grinder? For like another third, fourth line guy? You know what I mean? Like, are you going to trade him for somebody who's going to be a finesse guy to come in here, not add any kind of toughness on a forecheck? Or are we talking about somebody that's not going to get into the high chance areas and get into, into some dirty play to force a goal across to change the momentum of a game? Like, I don't see that either. If you trade Jake Voracek, you're losing a primary playmaker. If he's off this team, where's the creativity coming from? And so, like, I don't know if schematically any of this works, even if you do make that trade. Making a small trade, a small tweak to this roster isn't going to do anything. If you make a change at coach, like, I don't know, do we really genuinely think, and maybe this is something that we really should talk about, but as a fan base, as media, do we genuinely think that there is so much untapped potential here that making a coaching change now is going to jolt this team and unlock this hidden level of skill that has not been reached by this coach? I'm not so sure that it exists.
No, you're probably right. In all honesty, I think maybe some of the players that the Flyers have on this roster, who were deemed to be these great prospects coming in, are not living up to the potential. That doesn't mean that they're bad players, because they're not, but they may not be as good as everyone kind of championed them to be. So there is that. But I will say that if you're asking me, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. In other words, I don't think you just make a change for the coach, because if you bring in a new coach and you keep the same 20 guys on the roster, you're probably not going to get much different. You might get a little bit better, but on the whole, you're going to be probably the same. I think there has to be multiple things here. A new coach would be great, but so would making a move that changes the face of the team, changes the culture of the team, changes the approach of the team. I think those two things are hand in hand.
Who's it going to be, though? You know what I mean? Like,
that's a great question.
Like, are they going to get in on Nylander? Are they going to get in on, like, there were rumors out there again that Tarasenko might be available. Like, what's it going to cost to go out and get a guy like Tarasenko?
I don't necessarily know if those are the guys that you're chasing, because those guys, if they get traded and when they get traded, they will go to teams who are contenders. I don't think you're going to make a move. I don't think anybody's trading. If you're trading Jake Voracek, let's just say, I mean, like I told you a month ago, Voracek is a guy that I think that they would, I've been told that they would move if it gets to that point. You're not trading Jake Voracek to get Tarasenko or Nylander. You're trading Jake Voracek to get younger pieces who you can put into the lineup in multiple places to try and get better in more than one spot. I'm not certain that going Voracek for a Tarasenko or a Nylander is get you any further on the path. Yeah, Nylander's a young star, up and coming star player, but is he going to put up the same kind of point production that Voracek's put up over the last few years? Maybe eventually, but not right away. I'm not sure that Tarasenko fits the mold any better than what you from what you have here. Like, so I think if you're going to move somebody like that, you're moving them to give younger people an opportunity. I think that's admitting that there's something wrong with the team and it needs a new direction.
There are plenty of fans who've been calling for years. I mean, we're probably in year 3 of the questioning of, is Claude Giroux the guy to lead this team forward, or is it time to just do a full teardown? I think it's so easy for fans, again, like we've talked ad nauseum at this point about the misconception that exists, I know that the Sixers and the Flyers play in the same season, and so people like to make the comparison to the process and to Sam Hinkie and tearing the whole thing down. But you draft a kid number one overall, and unless he's Markelle Fultz, you expect him to come in and make an immediate impact and be a difference maker on the court. With hockey, hockey's more like baseball. It takes years to see a return on your investment, to see a return on that player, unless they're a generational talent, unless they're somebody like a Connor McDavid or a Sidney Crosby or a kid who, just blows the doors off right from the get-go, like Austin Matthews did. Like, unless you end up with one of those guys, you're still years away. So even if you are to trade Giroux or Voracek or whomever, whatever value you're going to get back probably isn't going to be that guy immediately. So, are fans really that hell-bent on tearing this thing down and seeing it be awful for the next 3-4 years? And by the way, if you do that, you're not getting a guy like Joel Quenneville to come in here and get the things, to get this thing built. He's what, 60, 61? Is he going to come in for 3 years to do a rebuild? Is he even the guy to do it? Like, these are all questions that I think fans really have to contemplate here, because unless you're going to fully bottom out and try to get that stud in the next year's draft to come in and right the ship next year, I just don't see it. They're too good to be that bad, and they're too bad to be a cup contender. They're mediocre.
And it sucks.
It does.
It sucks to watch it when we have to do it every game, Russ. Every game, you and me. Well, anyway, we need to wrap this puppy up. I have somewhere to be.
It's so late. It's so late.
It has more to do with my children than it does me going anywhere fun.
Bless them. They're a blessing. It's Thanksgiving.
Yes. But I do want to say that I want to leave a little teaser out there for the listeners. We have reached out to the team to procure a guest for Snow the Goalie that would be a very unique guest. That in the sense that it's someone who has not done these podcasts before, and not just ours, but really any Flyers podcast for that matter.
Well, we are the only Flyers podcast. So.
And we've gotten a yes back from the team. However, we can't say who it is or when it's going to be, because there is a little bit of what I will call the language of delay. And the language of delay basically means that the person has agreed to come on our show, but that they need certain things to happen first involving the hockey team, not involving us, but involving the team, before we can actually go over to Voorhees and record the interview. With that said, we will have a cool interview for you. I just can't say if it's going to be the next episode. It might be the episode after that. We'll see, but it will depend a lot upon what happens with this team over the course of the next few games. How's that? Is that fair?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay.
Let the speculation reign. We won't confirm or deny on Twitter, but feel free to reach out to us. And all I can say is it will be, in theory, it would be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if someone would saying controversial as a guest, would that stoke the flames?
It could be.
That's the way I would describe it.
Controversial.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. We will leave you with that. Many of you are probably listening to this either on Thanksgiving, looking for respite to get away from the family, from the kids, from your screaming families at the table, or perhaps you're listening to it after Thanksgiving, in which case we hope the holiday was good if you're listening on Thanksgiving. As I said off the top of the show, we have many things to be thankful for. I am thankful for a wonderful co-host who has the ability to reach out to the team and have them actually respond to him and, line up guests that I think people want to hear from. And I'm thankful for our listener base, which as I mentioned off the top, continues to grow. It's always funny to me when we find out how people find out about the show. I put this stuff out on, it goes on Twitter, it goes on Facebook, it goes on the website. But we actually have a 5-star review, Anthony,
Ah,
and it was an interesting one.
go
I
ahead.
think it kind of speaks to this. It's by I don't know how to say this name. It's like Nrotindo. I'm sorry. I probably messed up your name, and that's not good.
I
But
would bet you it's N. Rotindo.
sure, Nrotindo. Hey there, Nrotindo. How are you? So glad I found this. 5 stars. Stumbled upon this on Twitter. It's so awesome to hear Flyers talk from people that know what they are talking about. Well, I appreciate that, Nrotindo, assuming that is your real name. It's just like anything else. If you want the content to continue to be good, you want to continue to hear from players, from people within the organization. The best way to do it is to continue to go on to iTunes or Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. The rating is awesome, but the review also helps, and that'll help us climb those leaderboards. And of course, we're the only Flyers podcast, so I don't know how there could even be a leaderboard. We pretty much are the leader. We are the worldwide leader in Flyers content. But go on there, leave a 5-star rating, 5-star review. Let people know in your life who are looking for, Flyers hockey talk, that they can find out about Snow the Goalie, can find it on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever else they get their podcasts. Anybody who complains to you, I wish they talked about the Flyers on Sports Talk Radio. Why would you want that when you can control the pacing and listening whenever you want to Snow the Goalie? Don't forget, Friday, Anthony and I will be down there, Black Friday, for Flyers, Rangers. Hopefully the black won't be the pit of despair that we'll feel in our hearts and minds as we watch this team take the ice against a team that, quite frankly, I never go into a game with confidence thinking they're going to come out with a win against the Rangers. But we will be down there. We'll be doing the Press Row show live from Press Row before the game at the first and second intermissions on the Crossing Broad Facebook page, as well as on Anthony's Twitter at AntSanPhilly. So make sure you check that out. In the description of this show, you can find links to the other shows on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, and you can click immediately, directly, on my Twitter handle or Anthony's Twitter handle. Follow us on Twitter, all that jazz, and interact with us. Let us know what you think about the show. You can throw out your guesses for who this mystery guest could be, and until the next time we speak, we will, we'll come back. We'll come back rejuvenated for the next episode, regardless, and including a Who's That Flyer. But until then, until Friday when we see you on the Press Row show, that's Anthony at AntSanPhilly. I'm Russ at Joy on Broad. Anthony, anything else you want to say before we head out for the holiday?
I'm thankful for you, Russ.
Stop.
That's it. I'm not going to say why. I'm just thankful for you.
Aw, you're so sweet. All right. This is Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's podcast, the Players podcast, the Pilgrims podcast, the Providence podcast, the Please Go Out and Get a Win This Friday podcast.